This next part of the review had by far the most copyright flags, so I opted to just replace all imagery with AI and random clips, and also re record the key dialogue sections myself. For whatever reason, well, I think we know the reason, this is the part of the movie that Disney's really protective of, and not in a good way. Disclaimer, I am not a huge Star Wars fan. Luke Skywalker was never my hero. That was Indiana Jones. So I don't mind this old man who's given up on the world trope because it is a trope, and usually tropes work. I mean, some of the few things that work in the sequel trilogy are the tropes, like Raylo, because it's basically, Beauty and the Beast, fixing the bad boy. That trope always works. And usually, old man who doesn't care anymore trope also works. If this movie had any balls at all, he'd be pushing that button there and bam! The other Porg would be vaporized. But oh no, this is modern Lucasfilm. We can't harm animals. Lame. Wait a minute, back that up. That's Luke's X-Wing under the water. Just like in Dagobah. They're setting something up for a really cool reveal that's super satisfying at the end of the movie. Right? Instead of talking about weird alien breast milk, let's talk about this inefficient fishing scene. Okay, so you've got a pole that's like, 50 stories tall? How does Luke lift this? This makes no sense. Does the Force give you superior upper arm strength? Look at that thing. That would weigh way more than Luke does. Oh boy, another boring dialogue scene. Something this movie doesn't get enough crap for is how goddamn long it is. Well, all movies are nowadays. 2 hours and 30 minutes. The story goes absolutely nowhere, and it takes all night to get there. Here's another scene with no balls. Chewie is going to eat a nice roasted porg. But oh no, the porgs are sad because he's eating their friend. Then we cut to this comically over-the-top close-up of a porg crying its eyes out because of what Chewie is doing. And you would normally do this as a farce. Like, that's so over-the-top you can't take it seriously, so you need to follow it up with a joke. What would the joke be? Chewie takes a giant bite out of the grilled porg. And then the porg flies away. But what do? They have Chewie contemplate, maybe I'm the bad guy, which means that close-up of the porg crying is to be taken seriously. It just doesn't work as humor. Most of the stuff on this island is just sheer boredom. Rey following Luke around and asking him the same question over and over and over. You must come help me with the resistance. You must come help me with the resistance. I think she asked him at least twice, if not 3 times. Again, why are they wasting our time with this in a movie that is a half hour too long? But Luke doesn't really seem to be training her on anything specific here. She's just kind of like waving a stick around, and there's like a hole in the ground that, of course, she has to go into. But it seems like they have that scene not because they understand why a character would go into a hole, but rather because, in Empire Strikes Back, he went into a cave, so she should also go into a cave. In Empire, Luke goes into a cave for the same reason that heroes always go into caves in classic stories, or the reason they go into the bellies of whales. It's a journey into oneself. You're actually fighting yourself, learning things about yourself, a journey of self-discovery. And in this case, Luke is reconciling with his father, and he realizes that if he destroys his father, he will destroy himself and become like his father. And this is further reinforced in Return of the Jedi when the Emperor wants him to kill his father and he looks at his own robotic hand, just like his father's. Unlike Rey, Luke has actually suffered for his decisions and literally lost a part of himself in the process. He's beginning to disintegrate. Meanwhile, when Rey goes into the cave, it means what exactly? The allegory of this cave is that there is no allegory. They just saw a scene in Star Wars, hey, she's supposed to go into a cave. All right, let's have her go into a cave. They use the parts of Star Wars without knowing how or why they work. It's very much like getting code off GitHub. You put it in your program, it works, but you don't know why it works. And that is the major difference between Disney Star Wars and George Lucas Star Wars. Can't push it off any longer. We're going to have to talk about Luke trying to kill his nephew. Now, there's 3 different versions of this story told throughout the film, like unreliable narrator. There's Luke's version, then there's Kylo's version, and then there's Luke's second version. This section is probably the most flagged, so I'm just going to recite my own version of it. What happened? I went to confront him, and he turned on me. Ah! He had sensed my power, as he senses yours, and he feared it. I'd sensed it building in him. I'd seen it in moments during his training. But then I looked inside, and it was beyond what I ever imagined. Snoke had already taken him. He who would bring destruction and pain and death and the end of everything I love the most is what he would become, and for the briefest moment, I thought about killing him. It passed like a fleeting shadow. Kylo does kill a ton of people. Is Luke entirely in the wrong for even considering this? Is it really that much different than walking into the Chancellor's office with a bunch of lit lightsabers?
In the name of the Galactic Senate of the Republic, you're under arrest, Chancellor.
Are you threatening me, Master Jedi?
The Senate will decide your fate.
Oh, well, actually, I am the Senate.
Not yet.
Neither of the two retellings change the end of the story, where Kylo does kill a bunch of people and steal a bunch of students who later become the Knights of Ren.
Ah!
There's a lot of discussion about how destroying Luke is part of postmodern filmmaking, relative moralism. Destroy it if you have to. But I kind of wonder if Luke was just kind of in the way of the story they wanted to tell with Rey and Kylo. Like, they had to make Kylo a bit of a victim in order to make Reylo work, and they were willing to sacrifice Luke to accomplish that. I mean, look at this scene here. It's fairly intimate, and then what happens? Old man Luke bursts through the door and says, "Hey, why you kissing the neighbor boy?" And then after this, Rey has a fight with Luke. At the end of the fight, Luke tells the third version of the story. So yeah, they kind of are setting up Luke as the villain here, or at least an obstacle character. So I'm going to have to admit, this stuff actually works from Rey and Kylo's perspective. The problem is the Star Wars audience doesn't want to see Luke as the heel. They could have tempered this pretty easily by having Luke's first version of the confrontation with Kylo Ren being what actually happened, because in the end, Kylo still goes and kills everyone in that temple and then takes a bunch of the students and turns them also into evil people. So he still has evil within him, which is fine. Rey can try to fix that, but do you really need to destroy Luke in the process? And just like at the end of the Dagobah scenes in Empire Strikes Back, Rey leaves to go off and confront Kylo, and Luke is left behind like Yoda thinking, "What are you doing, girl?" Rey and Kylo feels like an extension of the lame Luke story, because Luke's story pretty much ends at this point, and then we continue on from it to the Rey and Kylo story. But my God, it just goes on forever. Here's a great example of this movie trying to have it both ways. So they want to subvert your expectations with Snoke's speech, but visually they're telling you a mile ahead of time what Kylo Ren is going to do to Snoke. He has Rey fall down for no reason other than a fake out that, oh, maybe she was the one who got stabbed. Oh, God. Okay, that was a pretty well done shot. It's too bad the movie didn't have more stuff like this instead of all the endless talking that we're subjected to. But anyway, this isn't really subversive, because the same thing happened at the end of Return of the Jedi. Except for in that movie, when Darth Vader turned on Palpatine, he actually had a change of heart, whereas here, Kylo doesn't. And now Kylo and Rey proceed to spend the next 12 centuries fighting these red guys. Rey joining Kylo would have actually been subversive. It would have been a great cliffhanger leading into the third movie, but they refused to do it. They talk about being subversive, but they do it in the least interesting and least satisfying ways possible. They have no balls. And you can really tell that these movies weren't all planned out ahead of time, because she ends up joining with Kylo Ren in the next movie anyway, so all of this conflict is completely pointless. Slightly off topic, but it can't be understated how long and sluggish and boring these endless scenes in the hangars are. Also, if Finn was the main character, and he could have been a woman, and the fact that if he was a woman and then him having the superior officer Captain Phasma also being a woman, that could have been an interesting dynamic, but they also didn't do that either. And also, I guess she's dead. So that's one less reason to keep Finn alive, because now his adversary is gone. Ultimately, The Last Jedi is just a worse retelling of the same story from The Empire Strikes Back, with some scenes in reverse, like they put the ice planet at the end instead of the beginning, and instead of chasing a Millennium Falcon with a damaged hyperdrive, they're chasing a ship that they can track through hyperspace. Although I'm pretty sure The Empire Strikes Back was shorter than this movie. And you know, The Empire Strikes Back wasn't an instant classic hit. I mean, it was somewhat controversial upon release. Yes, now it's considered the best Star Wars. At least in Empire, the themes it talked about were universal and true, unlike The Last Jedi, where none of the themes make sense. And that's why The Last Jedi will never have the legacy that The Empire Strikes Back has. And for crying out loud, what were they hoping to accomplish with these piece of junk vehicles, other than a suicide run, which they don't do? Well, I guess that's a good place to segue onto the end of the movie. Is there any way to fix it? In conclusion, I think The Last Jedi was a movie that was a few drafts short of greatness. I think they really could have gone somewhere with this, but maybe they were rushed and they're like, hey, this is good enough. And really, there's so many things in the movie that just aren't satisfying. There's setups without payoffs and payoffs without setups. And, you know, payoffs and setups is a critical part of storytelling. And again, I think if they would have made just one change to improve this movie, they should have added a scene of Luke showing up for real and kicking butt for real. I mentioned earlier, I don't like Rogue One. I didn't think it was a very good movie, but the last 30 minutes of Rogue One is the best Star Wars that Disney has ever made. And you get to see Darth Vader kicking butt. I think if they would have just added a scene of Luke kicking butt, the walk out of the theater impression of this movie would have been so much better, because people want to see that. They wanted to see Luke Skywalker kicking butt. And the people making The Mandalorian clearly recognized that was a mistake that Last Jedi made, and they're like, maybe we should put in a scene of Luke Skywalker kicking butt, since that's what the audience actually wanted to see. And hey, why not kill some characters? Pretty much everyone died in Rogue One, and most of the Star Wars fan base loved that movie. It's okay to kill characters as long as their deaths feel earned. But in The Last Jedi, some characters lived for no reason, and other characters died for no reason. It was just backwards. A lot of modern filmmakers seem to think they're above story. Like, oh no, I can make stories the way I want to make them. No, you can't. We have like tens of thousands of years of storytelling in our human history, and it works in a certain way for a reason. You know, you're not actually gonna go into the woods and find a gingerbread house, but you tell that story to your kids to warn them about the dangers of strangers. Like, that's the real point of storytelling. It's to teach lessons, but they should be good lessons, not this moral ambivalence crap. The one thing that George Lucas really did, George Lucas was like Prometheus. He didn't create this style of classical storytelling. He stole it from the gods, and then he gave it to mankind. If you think about when Star Wars came out, it was in the 1970s, an incredibly jaded decade, and most of the entertainment was disaster films or political films. And, you know, the political scene back then was pretty dour. But then you have Star Wars, like you have the shining ray of light, where evil is evil and good is good, and that's why people loved it. And you know what? Even today, evil is evil and good is good. That never changes. Stories never change. And if you try to change stories, you will fail.